Hello and welcome to The Machine. I'm your host, George Giduma, and today we are going to be talking about version control systems. And in particular, we're going to look at the Git version control system. We will seek to understand what version control system is, look at the most popular version control system, that is Git, install and set up Git via the command line interface, and lastly, explore some basic Git commands. But before we continue, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit that bell icon to get notified when new content comes up. Give the video a like so that it can be recommended to more cool learners like you. And finally, consider supporting the channel through the Buy Me a Coffee link that is in the description. If that's all done, let's get into it. What is a version control system? This is a system that allows you to track changes made to files over time, as well as collaborate with others on those files. The version control system is commonly used in software development, but can also be used in managing changes to other types of files, such as documents, images, and videos. Some examples of version control systems include Git, a popular distributed version control system, SVN or Subversion, a centralized version control system, Mercurial, a distributed version control system, Paphos, a centralized version control system commonly used in the gaming industry to manage large code bases, CVCS or concurrent version system, a centralized version control system that was popular in the 90s and early 2000s. I am sure by now you're wondering what is the difference between a distributed version control system and a centralized version control system. Let me explain. Distributed version control systems and centralized version control systems are two different approaches to managing file changes to software code, documentation, or other digital assets. In a centralized version control system, there is a single central repository that contains the latest version of the code. Developers check out the files from the central repository, work on them locally, and then check them back in when they are done. This model has been the traditional approach to version control for many years, with tools like CVS, SVN, and Paphos being popular examples as mentioned earlier. On the other hand, in a distributed version control system, each developer has their own local repository, which is a complete copy of the entire codebase. Developers can make changes locally and commit them to their local repository without any immediate connection to the central server. The changes can be shared with other developers by pushing them to a remote repository, which can be hosted on a central server or in a distributed platform like Git, also mentioned before. The key difference between these two approaches is the degree of centralization involved. In a centralized system, all changes flow through a central server, which can be a bottleneck or a single point of failure. In contrast, in a distributed system, each developer has their own copy of the codebase, making it more resilient and allowing for greater flexibility in how development is managed. Overall, both centralized and distributed version control systems have their own benefits and drawbacks, and the choice between them will depend on the specific needs and preference of the development team. Now, let's have a look at the most popular version control system in the world used by 93% of developers according to Stack Overflow, Git. Git is a distributed version control system that allows users to track file changes and collaborate with others on projects. It was created by Linus Torvalds in 2005 and has since become one of the most widely used version control systems in the world. Git works by creating a local repository on your computer where you can make changes to files and commit them to the repository. You can also create different branches of a project where changes can be made and tested independently before being merged back into the main branch. This makes it easier to work on complex projects with multiple contributors without having to worry about conflicting changes. One of the key features of Git is its distributed nature, which means that each user has a complete copy of the repository on their local machine. This makes it possible to work offline and collaborate with others without needing a centralized server. Git is also highly customizable with wide ranges of plugins and extensions available to add new features and functionalities. It can be used with a variety of different platforms and tools, including GitHub, GitLab, and Bitbucket, which provide additional features for collaboration and project management. Now, let's go ahead and install Git into our computer so that we can have a feel of it. And for you to do that, you want to go to the official Git website, and I'll be giving you the links to that. So don't worry so much about that. So we're gonna fire up our browser, and then we're going to put in our link there, and you can see that's the download page for that. And you can either download one for macOS, Windows, or Linux. So if you're on macOS, you want to use brew install, or you want to use sudo port install git, and there's other ways of doing that. You can also build it from source. If you're on Windows, it depends with the system you're using, either a 32-bit system or a 64-bit system. If you want a portable one, or you want a standalone installer, depending on whichever system you're using, you can decide. Or you can even get it using the winget install command. So that is for Windows. But for our sake, we are going to be doing the Linux install. And here is the Linux install. And I'll be guiding you through this installation. So let's go ahead and fire our terminal. So let's first of all fire our terminal. And now that we have our terminal, as usual, let's make it bigger so that we can be able to see the commands that are going there. And yeah, so first of all, you want to run a sudo apt update and a sudo apt upgrade. So these two commands helps you to upgrade your repositories so that you're getting the latest version of whatever you want to download. So we're going to do a sudo apt update, and as usual, ask us for our pin. So it's gonna update our packages so that we are only getting the latest packages. And so let's give it a bit of time as it does that. And this is one of the reasons I told you I like the command line interface, because the command line interface is a place whereby you can be able to see what is happening with whatever you're doing. So for example, it is telling us that these packages are there's these new packages that are available, and all these packages are available for us to upgrade. And so updating them is whereby you go and see what is there. It's like a window shopping. And then upgrading is where you accept to upgrade them. So usually you might want to upgrade specific repositories, but in my case, I always recommend for you to do a complete upgrade, because it kind of like makes your machine a new machine. And who doesn't like a new machine? And who doesn't like using the freshest repositories that are there for us? So you can see it is telling us it is fetching all these repositories, and it's reading them, and it is telling us there are 1416 packages that can be upgraded. So you can run this command, uplist upgradable. So let's see what is upgradable in our case. So you can copy this command. Let's copy that selection, and let's paste that, and we should be able to see a list. All these are upgradable. All these are what we can be able to upgrade. So for the sake of learning, let's do an upgrade of all of them. Okay, so let's just do sudo apt upgrade, and this might take a bit of time depending on the machine that you're using. So it also depends on when was the last time you upgraded your machine. So let's run that, and it's gonna ask us, it will need to 887 MB of additional Git disk space to be able to run this upgrade. So we're gonna say yes to that, and yeah, it's gonna start downloading this, and as you can see, it is downloading, and this is close to 1 GB, so it might take a bit of time. And yeah, so let's just wait and see what's happening. If it takes a bit too long, I'm gonna forward the video, so don't worry about that. So right now what is happening, it's downloading all the repository that it needs to update from, so that's gonna take a bit of time, and also it will depend with how quick your internet is. So mine is not the fastest, so it's taking a bit of time, and yeah, that's why we need you to support the channel. You can click that buy me a coffee link. You can go have a coffee in the meantime, and wait for this to kind of do its thing. And once it's finished downloading, you will be able to see that it will now do an installation, and I'll also be showing you that once that is done. Just to help you understand what is happening here, so it is doing something called get. So it's getting, and getting also is similar to fetching, and it's going to a URL or a link on the internet. And for example, here it's going to kali.download.kali, and this is the main branch from which it is trying to download from, and it also tells you the type of download that it's doing. So it's doing an ARM64, and then it also tells you what exactly it's downloading. So here you can see it's Python, lib, so there's different things that it's downloading. There's SQLite there, you can see. So, and also it tells you how big that file is, so you can be able to see it, the length of the file, and the size of the file. So that is what is happening here if you're trying to understand what is happening. Whatever is happening here is also called logging in computer, and this is whereby the computer gives you feedback, it records all that it's doing. So the process of computer recording or showing you what it's doing is called logging. So one of the advantages of doing regular update and upgrade is security patches. So every now and then, like the Linux community works on security patches that make sure that your computer is safe. So when you do regular updates and upgrades, you're assured that your computer is safe. So you're assured that you're less likely to be hacked, especially if you're working in a security or using a security distribution like Kali Linux, or you're working in security. You want to make sure that you have all the best security patches at all times, so that you're not hacked or you're not intruded by what we call a bad actor. So as you can see, the download process is completing, and that has been done, and so it's gonna extract those packages, and once it has done that, then it's gonna do a pre-configuration, and then now it starts installing. So this is now the installation process. The process that we were looking at before was downloading process of downloading of the packages, and now the next process that we're going to have is the installation of those packages, which is now what is called the upgrading. This is the actual upgrade. So we'll wait for that to see that complete, and then we'll continue. Now that our packages have been updated and upgraded, we're gonna do a git install, and to do this, we want to run the following command. So we always start with sudo for any installation, and I told you sudo stands for sudo super user do, and it gives you administrator privileges for you to be able to do an installation. Then we're gonna do an apt, and apt stands for advanced packaging tool, and the advanced packaging tool basically packages all our applications into a way that can be consumed by our operating system. So our Linux operating system or Debian operating system uses this for any installation. And then we're gonna do an install, for installation, and we're gonna say install Git. Okay, and as usual, it's gonna ask you for a password, which is your secret. Don't share your password. And so it is telling us that Git is already the newest version. So there's already Git that exists here. If you read from this information here, Git is already the newest version. So we already have Git installed, and it even tells us the version that is there. However, it gives us some information. It says the following packages were automatically installed and are no longer required. So we can remove them by doing sudo apt auto remove. So let's do that so that we can clear some space for other things to happen. So we're gonna copy that selection, and we're gonna paste it there. You can see it will give us after this 142 MB of disk spaces will be freed, so that is good. So let's do that. Now that we know we have Git installed, we can check for the Git version that we have using the git version command. So let's run that. So we can see that we are running the Git version 2.39.2, which according to our previous information, it is the latest version. Okay, so now we want to configure Git so that Git recognizes us with our credentials. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. The first thing, we want to set a username, and for us to set the username, we're going to run git config, which is basically configuration, and then we're going to set global. Global basically means that this is accessible by all application. It is global for the whole machine, so it is available for every user who will use this account. So that's what global means. And then we're gonna say user.name, and then here you're gonna put your name, and in our case we want to put the name the machine, so the name of the computer that we're using, and in this case we're just gonna combine it, the machine. And once we do that, if you don't see any response, it means that everything went as intended. Then the next thing we're going to do is to configure our email, and we're going to do that with git config again global, and then user.email. And now we're gonna put our email, and our email is for this account. Let me just confirm. The email for this account is the machine ke@gmail.com. Again, we're gonna click enter, and again, if you don't see a response, it means that everything went according to our expectation. Now we want to configure our branch so that instead of calling the main branch a master branch, it will call it a main branch. So let's do that by doing git config. I think you're seeing a pattern, and again we're gonna have global, and then we want to make sure that the init, we're gonna look at that command in a bit, but the init default branch will be called main. Okay, that's basically what that command is saying. So we are configuring the Git global so that when we init or we initialize Git, the default branch is main. So that's how you can read that command. And we're gonna click enter. And again, if you don't get a response, then you can know that you did everything correctly. Now, the last thing we want to look under this section is our configuration. So for us to see a list of all the configurations that we have done, we can do a git config and then call the list of the configurations that are available. And we can see an error because we only put one dash. So let's correct that. And that's a good thing about command line interface. It tells you what you did. So it says, did you mean with 2 dashes? Exactly, I meant it with 2 dashes. And let's put that 2 dashes again. And now you can see the username is the machine, and our email, we have set it to the machine ke@gmail.com, and also we have set the default branch to be main. So those are the configurations that we have done. And with that, we finished the setup and installation of Git using the command line interface. So the next thing we're going to be doing is we are going to be looking at some of the commands that you're going to be using in Git. And for us to do that, we're going to start by clearing our terminal so that we have a clean working space. Okay. Now, let's confirm that we are in the home folder by running the pwd command. And then we can see we're in the machine. And inside the machine, using the ls, we can see that we have a document existing as one of the folder. So we want to go into that folder using the cd command, and let's go into document. And you can use the tab to autocomplete. And let's check inside, and as you can see, it's empty. So let's create a new folder inside there called coding tools using the mkdir. And again, we're going to use the verbose to make sure that it prints out whatever it has created. And we are going to call it coding tools. Okay, so it tells us it created a directory called coding tools, and we want to go inside this directory so that we can be able to test some of the Git commands that exist. Okay, so let's cd into that. And using tab, we can autocomplete. And now we see we can confirm with our pwd command that we are inside the coding tools file. So the first command that we want to test is the git status. Okay, git status command. So the git status command, it tells us if you're inside, it tells us the state of Git at any point. Okay, so this command checks for the status of Git in the current repository that you're in. The first thing you want to check is if Git has been initialized in that directory. So we're gonna use the Git status to see if Git has been initialized in that. So for one to be able to track changes in a repository, you want to initialize Git in that directory. So let's go and do that. So we're gonna do a git status, and it tells us fatal, not a Git repository or any of the parent directories .git. So there's no Git initialized in this. So that is one way of using a git status command to be able to check for that. Now, the next thing we want to do now, because we can see the Git has not been initialized, We're going to clear that. And then now we want to initialize. And what is initialization? So as stated previously, for Git to start tracking changes, Git has to be initialized. This is done with a git init command that creates a new Git subdirectory in the current directory that contains all the necessary files for Git to start tracking the changes to your project. So we need to create a subdirectory of Git inside there so that it can start tracking and keeping those changes that we have done. So for us to do that, we're going to do a git init. And basically, you can see it tells us that initialize an empty Git repository in home.machine in our coding tools. So there's a file that has been created called .git. But if we go and list normally, you cannot see it because we are using the normal list. So for us to see that Git folder that has been created, we're going to use ls, and we're going to ls all. And now you can see there's a new file called .git that has been created. And this is a file that now will be tracking all the changes that we make. So all the changes that we make will be stored in that file and will be tracked by Git. Okay, so that is for the Git init. Now, for us to be able to do, for us to be able to see a tracking of a file, or to be able to track a file and to be able to track changes and commit changes to that file, we want to first have a file to be able to do that in. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna go back for a minute using the cd command. So let's just clear, and then we're going to go back a bit with the cd command, the double cd, and then we're gonna open a VS Code terminal because we're gonna be doing some editing, code editing, for us to see the changes made to a file. So we're gonna do code, and we're gonna open a coding tool. So we're gonna open the coding tool. We're gonna open VS Code inside the coding tool folder, and there we go. So there's a bit of a problem, so let's close that. Let's see if it opened. Let's close this for now. Not yet. So let's go back to our terminal and run that command again. Great. Now we have a terminal we have VS Code open, and yes, I trust the author of this. Now we want to open a terminal inside VS Code. Okay, we're gonna open a terminal inside VS Code. So let's open a terminal inside VS Code, and for you to do that, you can just come here and click on terminal up here, and then click new terminal, and now we see we have a new terminal inside here. Okay, and you can see if we do pwd inside that terminal, we can see we're inside coding tools. Okay, now we want to create a file on which we can track changes on, and this file we shall name it the command line interface.md. So let's do that. So we're gonna use the touch command, and we're gonna create a new file called the command line interface.md. MD stands for Markdown. It's a type of language that you use in writing files. And immediately we can see that our file has been created here. So if you open here, you can see now we have a new file called the command line interface.md. So you just come to this Explorer and you click and you can be able to see the file. Now, what we'll do, we will go and copy some text from, just go to my medium.com stroke at George Giduma. Okay, yeah. So you want to come to this article, and we're just gonna copy this first paragraph of what is a command line. So let's copy this, and sorry, let's copy that, and then let's go to our VS Code. Let's paste it. So in Markdown language, you can use hash to capitalize words. So we're gonna use double hash there, and we want to save that. Okay. Now, if we come down here and do a git status to check what is the status of our git, first of all, let's just delete that and save and leave it as it was before. Okay, so let's do a git status to check what is the condition. So there's an attract changes whereby we can see there's a new file that has been created called command line interface md that has been created, and it tells us untracked changes. These changes has not been tracked. So let us go and paste what we had pasted before. Sorry for that. Let's paste that, and let's just give it a double hash for capitals here and save. And let's look at our git status again. We can see there's command line interface that has been created. Now we want to add something called staging. We want to do something called staging, and staging is whereby you queue something to commit. You put something to be committed on a queue. So we are going to do a git add, but now we're going to add this specific file that we have. So let's do that. Git add. We're going to use the git add command, and then the file that is there, we can to complete it. Git add, we are going to add this, and once we do that, if we do a git status again, we can see now these are the changes to be committed. There's a new file to be committed, and now it has turned from red to green. Okay, and now we want to commit that file, and we're going to use the git commit command. So we're going to do a git commit, and we're going to use m, because m adds a message to any commit that you do. Because for you to do a commit, you want to put a message so that it can tell you what exactly it is doing. Okay, so what changes did you do? So we're gonna say it's a initial commit. Okay, and that initial commit is called what is command line interface. So we can just use the title, what is command line interface. Okay, and then now you do an enter, And it can tell you immediately that the initial commit, what is command line interface, has been done. So 3 insertion has been done. So created the command line interface.md. So this is the commit that has happened. And for us to see what commits that we have done, you can use another command called git log. So we're gonna do git log, and when we run that, we can see this is the commit that has been done, and you can see the commit is unique. Okay, it has been done on the main. You can see the head is main, and the author, it tells you the author who has done it, and then the machine and his email, and then the date at which it was done, and this is also unique. Okay, and then what was committed and its initial command line interface. So we can just go back to our document. Let's go back to our document and maybe just do one more. Let's do paragraph 2. Control. Let's copy that. Sorry for that. Let's close that. Let's copy the second paragraph. Copy. And then let's go back to VS Code. Okay. And let's paste this one here. And let's save that. Okay. No, cancel. Let's make sure we save that. So once we save that, let's go and check the status again. You can see there's an untracked changes here. So it is in red. So it's not been added. So changes not staged for commit. So it tells you changes not staged for commit. So for you to stage it, you can use the git add and file name to update that will be committed, or you can use git restore to discard changes that we don't want. So in this case, we want to add the changes again. So we're gonna do a git add the command line interface, the name of the file. Then let's check at the status again, and you can see changes to be committed, modified. We have modified git command line, and we can restore those changes using the git restore and the file name if we want to unstage, but we don't want to unstage and we want to commit. So we're gonna do git commit, and then we're gonna use the message, and then we're gonna now say added paragraph 2 to what is command line interface. And if we do that, we can see the file has been committed, and we can use git log again to check. And now we can see now you can use the top and bottom arrow to navigate, and you can see now there's another commit that the first commit happened at this time, and now at this time a second commit has happened, and now it has a different hash unique to it, and it has happened at the main, and again it has been committed by this guy. And for us to be able to get out of that, we can use Q, and we are back. So that's some of the basic commands that you can use to do committing, staging, and all that. To conclude our session, I'm gonna be leaving you with some reference material that you can use to study some more on Git, And in our case, we're gonna start with the documentation. So I'll leave the link on the description, but under documentation, you should be able to see a reference manual which has most of the Git commands that and the explanation. So for example, you can see Git here, init, you can see add and status that you have already used. But also there's a book, a free online book, Pro Git, written by Scott Chacon and Ben Straub. And this one you can read online for free. So if you just click there, you can be able to see getting started, Git basics, Git branching, and all that. So you can go and read more on that. Also, if you're more of a YouTube person, there's a Git and GitHub crash course for beginners, and this is by FreeCodeCamp. You know, FreeCodeCamp is my go-to YouTube page for learning. So feel free to check on that, and yeah, that will be all for now. Next time we are going to be looking at GitHub and Git go hand in hand together. So looking forward to seeing you then, and that will be the last episode for the coding tools series that I've been running. See you next time, and thank you for joining.